Hello and welcome back. So again, this is a channel dedicated to really beginners or newbies that are getting into the hobby, and we're looking at a Bandit VXL, which is the brushless model, and we're doing a complete teardown. A lot of the things here are very similar or the exact same with the regular Bandit. Really, the only thing that changes is the brushless system, which we removed the ESC in the previous one, brushless motor, and then bearings. This has bearings instead of bushings. Now we're going to remove the motor, but also we're not just going to remove the motor. I'm going to talk about the mesh as well. So for the motor, you just want to turn the chassis over, and you're going to have these two screws for the cover. Now this is a cover that I recommend you always run a cover. And the reason why is the teeth there are 48 teeth, which is pretty fine. And if you get anything in there, such as a grain of sand, it will destroy your spur. It will, if it gets caught between the teeth of your pinion gear, your pinion will chew up the spur. And it's always better to not have to do any repairs. So always run the cover. And in here, you have the spur, which is this one here, and you have the pinion, which is this one here. Now, we are going to do a video on a slash later on, but one of the things you're going to notice is the transmission is the same transmission. I also recommend the VXL because the idler gear is a metal gear versus a plastic gear, so it's a little reinforced. But one of the things you're going to notice is the spur is going to be a 76 tooth spur versus an 86 or a 90 tooth. The pinion is also going to be so this is smaller, this is bigger, this is 24 versus it might be a 20. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you ever swap parts from a Bandit to a Rustler to a Slash, the parts are interchangeable, but you have to keep the gear ratios in mind. Because if you were to do this on a Slash, it would be great for speed runs, but you're going to burn up the motor. The motor's just going to run really, really hot. So it's something that you have to keep in mind. This buggy is a lot lighter than a Slash. A Slash is about 2,500 grams. So you're looking at, right, so a kilo is about 2.2 pounds. So, 2.5 kilos times 2.2, right? You're looking at just over 5 pounds for the Slash. So you're going to have to gear down for the Slash. All right, so back to the motor. For the motor, you have these two screws here. This screw holds the motor in place. This one is the one that sets the mesh. So you loosen that one a little, and then you loosen this one, and then you can move the mesh. So let me talk about this first, and then I will show you how to actually remove the motor. But since we're here, we might as well talk about mesh. So one of the things to notice is there is a little bit of play here. So you do want a little bit of play. But let's just say you swap your pinion. So if you swap your pinion or spur, you have to go in here and you're going to have to reset the mesh. So the motor has to be on, just a little loose, not too loose. And the motor's just going to slide. So now there's a greater gap. I mean, you should be able to hear and see some of that sliding action. But the reason why you don't want to loosen it too much is because you want to keep these aligned, these gears. And if they're not aligned, this spur, the spur in relation to the pinion, or the pinion in relation to the spur, will be off to one side or the other, and it's going to wear out this plastic part, which is the spur. So you want to make sure the teeth fit nicely lengthwise, and that's really the reason why. So when you're doing it, it depends on how you feel comfortable aligning it. I mean, you can align it this way and work on it this way or sideways. I like working on it this way so that I can look at this here. So here, notice you push it forward, See how it's aligned? If you go over here, it would not. So you want to align it first. And here, if you moved it over here, they wouldn't really mesh correct, so it would slip. So notice how I'm holding one and I was able to turn the spur. You even heard it. It's actually skipping teeth. So if you ever hear that sound, skipping teeth, there's probably something wrong with your spur or with your mesh. So how do you set your mesh? Well, setting the mesh is actually very simple. You need a little piece of paper. So binder paper works, or anything that's about the size of binder paper. And you're just going to set this in between the gears. So that's my recommendation. So always carry one. I want to use a new one. After you use it, it's going to look like a little accordion. But you just kind of run it and then spin. Now spin the spur up here. So you're spinning the spur. Don't spin the spur there. You don't want your finger to get caught between the two because you're spinning it this way. So once you spin it there, just move the motor closer to the spur. And that piece of paper is the correct thickness for the gap that you want in between the two gears, because you actually want a little bit of a gap. So do not, under any circumstance, push the gears together all the way to where they're really close together. And the reason why is, one, you're going to notice they're not going to move as freely. The other thing too is it's going to be more work for your motor to spin your drivetrain, which is just going to create more heat. Your motor is going to heat up. It's also going to be a little slower because of the extra pressure, so that extra pressure is going to create more friction. So now that you do that, I mean, you can continue spinning. Look, it spins just fine. It's going to come out. See how it turns like a little accordion? Kind of eats up the paper. All right, anyway, you can still reuse this. So keep that little piece of paper. But that was it. Now my mesh is set properly. So there we go. But the whole purpose of this is to remove the motor. On the slash, you don't have to remove the pinion usually because it's smaller. But on this one, as you can see, this gear is bigger than the hole here in the transmission. So here we are actually going to have to use our other driver, which is a smaller driver, to remove the little oppressor screw or set screw. So you're going to need your 1.5 high quality. Always go with high quality tools. And the reason why is you don't want to be stripping these little set screws, and you're just going to loosen, and that is it. And then once it's loose, this gear should just slide right off. I actually don't want to take the whole thing out. There we go. I'm actually going to loosen the motor a little because remember I retightened it. And this is going to slide right out. That's it. And this is what your spur looks like. Now, when you reinstall a spur, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is in Traxxas vehicles, because of the orientation of the teeth, see there, the gear has to go in like this. Right? So it's going to go into the motor this way. And that's so that the gears line up here. If you're using this motor on a different setup, you may have to flip the pinion this way. But here, teeth go first and the collar goes at the end. So there we go. We've removed this. Now we can back out the screws all the way. So we're just going to grab this. There we go. One of the things that I like doing is I will start here just to have more leverage on the driver, but then once it's loose, I'll actually just spin it here by the shaft. Makes it a lot easier. Right. Pretty quick. And then the motor will just slide right out. And then you just pull the cables through, and that's it. So we have successfully removed our motor. Now you may have to remove the motor for a variety of reasons. Maybe you're replacing it. So if you have the brushed version, you want to go brushless, there you go. Now really quick, if you do have the brushed version, just get the bearings first. You don't actually need the brushless version. The brushed version is fine. It's good enough for 2S. It's actually very torquey. It's a good motor. Speed-wise, VXL and the Titan motor. So these are both the Traxxas motors. So VXL is the brushless, Titan is the brushed. They're going to be about just as fast. So if you were to do just a drag race between two buggies that are similar, right? Ball bearings, everything's the same except for the ESC and the motor. They're going to be just as fast. It's going to be very, very close. At that point, it's probably your gearing that's going to matter the most. Where you're going to get the difference is the runtime is going to be a little longer on the VXL under the same driving conditions. So same driver driving it the same, you're going to get a longer runtime. Are you really going to notice the difference between 2 or 3 minutes when your runtime is 30 minutes? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see, something else. This is 3S compatible. Once you put a 3S battery, that's what makes the difference really in speed and power. And so it's really just the volts. You're going from 2S to 3S. So if you're not going to be running 3S, just keep the Titan motor in there. You should be spending your money upgrading other things. Like I mentioned, caster blocks, the rear carriers, the steering bell crank, for example. Leave the motor until the end. Right? Once you're a better driver, then you can start thinking of speed. But at first, slow is going to be fast and slow is going to be fun. You're going to break less stuff. And that is it. You're going to be left with the transmission and the rear suspension components.